All right, y'all, welcome to the show. I got a big one for you today. So we have updates on Israel and Gaza. Hezbollah fires back. Israel bombs another school, this time a UN school. They were caught faking evidence. Later on, we'll get to the great bin Laden panic of 2023. That's a hilarious story. And then wait until you see the guy who won the Argentine presidential election. The dude is a certifiable whack job. The videos are astonishing. You're not going to believe that this guy won, but he did. So we'll talk about that and much, much more. Everybody, please do me a big favor. Subscribe to the channel. It helps massively in the algorithm, and it doesn't cost you anything. And much love to all of you who already have subscribed to the channel. Let's go ahead and dive into it here. So the last time we talked, Israel had just raided Al-Shifa hospital, and they claimed there was this big Hamas command and control center underneath the hospital. Now, apparently, the IDF themselves had built a basement or a bunker underneath the Al-Shifa hospital back when they controlled Gaza, back when they, controlled is not the right word, back when they occupied Gaza more directly in 1983. Now their occupation is more of like a total embargo and blockade. Back then they actually occupied it. And they built a bunker / basement underneath Al-Shifa hospital. So the speculation was, well, they are going to find like a full-on, command and control center for Hamas right underneath it. Well, it turns out that didn't exactly come to fruition. And so the language changed. The U.S. started describing it as, we found a Hamas command and control node. They changed the word from center to node, which of course depicts a much less busy, active, and full area where Hamas gathers. So they released some of these pictures. Let me show you here. This is what they say they found underneath the hospital. So you have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guns, maybe 10 guns. You got some ammunition. Is this WD-40? I don't know. I don't know what that is, to be honest. Then you have some, I guess, bulletproof vests, some boots. So this is what they released as evidence. And then you can see here they have there's a picture. Apparently they organized everything and then took a picture. So they acted like we got him. Now, by the way, look, to me, the issue was never, is there or isn't there some Hamas people in the building? That was never the issue to me. The issue was, even if there is, Israel always decides to press the button and kill massive numbers of civilians to get relatively small numbers of Hamas members. To me, that's the issue. So if there's not, Hamas people in the building, of course they shouldn't bomb. But even if there are Hamas people in the building, they shouldn't bomb unless you're talking about, like it's 90% Hamas people in the building. So you're going to have a collateral damage rate of 10%. Maybe I could see an argument for that. But anything 20, 30, 40, 80% civilians, and I think that's just psycho. But Israel, as you all know, always decides to bomb. They always decide to act and then turn around and blame Hamas and say, well, you're using human shields, so I just had to kill 90% civilians. I just never found that argument convincing. But come to find out, now we go to BBC did a segment on this here, and they are casting doubt on what Israel is presenting as evidence in this case. Watch.
Israel described the Al-Shifa hospital as the main headquarters for Hamas's terrorist activity. This IDF animation, posted in late October, claims to represent a Hamas tunnel system underneath the hospital. But having been inside Al-Shifa since early Wednesday, Israel's yet to produce evidence of the tunnels. It has allowed the BBC and Fox News to film at the hospital, though only locations of Israel's choice.
This is what they found.
Israel also released its own 7-minute video, which BBC Verify has analysed. A watch, visible in that video, suggests it was filmed a few hours before the BBC arrived. And this IDF video was posted, then deleted, then reposted. This time without a section referring to an Israeli soldier who'd been held hostage.
I don't know when this was used the last time.
Also in the video, we see a room with an MRI machine.
And if you zoom in and we get some light over here, what you'll be able to see is military equipment.
The BBC was shown the same room. And what we see in the two videos doesn't precisely match. For example, there's one gun in the IDF video, 2 by the time of the BBC footage. Israel has told BBC Verify this is because more weaponry and terrorist assets were discovered throughout the day.
And as always, an AK-47.
Israel also says its video is a single shot with no edits. But this appears to be an edit. We don't know the reasons for that edit, nor how significant it is. The IDF, though, says suggestions it's manipulating the media are incorrect. The IDF video also shows military equipment in other locations, though we can't verify how it came to be there. And what we see in this IDF video doesn't equate to Israel's description of Al-Shifa as an operational command center for Hamas. The US is using a different phrase, saying Al-Shifa was used as a command and control node. That implies a much smaller facility. Israel is adamant this hospital was a command centre, but for now, at least, it's either not found supporting evidence or it's not sharing it. Back to you, Sophie.
Now, another point that people were making is that you apparently can't have metal in the room with an MRI machine. I mean, I'm not, any sort of medical expert, but this is a point that I saw repeated time and time again. So it's sort of sketchy up front. This is the BBC, a Western media outlet, sort of denying some of the stronger claims of the IDF. Now, I will say they did find a tunnel and they recorded a video of the tunnel. But to my surprise, the tunnel was actually like kind of small. Like we already know that Gaza has all these tunnels all over the place. That's not a surprise. The thing that's surprising to me is that they're using the existence of the tunnel or tunnels to then justify bombing hospitals and bombing all this civilian infrastructure and saying, hey, we had to do it. I find that completely and utterly unacceptable. But I'm not surprised that they're finding some tunnels. Of course they're going to find some tunnels. There's tunnels all over the place in Gaza, and it's not just to bring in weapons. In fact, there was a story that I saw the other day how early on when the tunnels were built, they're also built because Gaza's under a complete and utter blockade. They can't even get in the amount of food that they need to survive. So they basically snuggle in food from Egypt, including, by the way, they bring in KFC, which I find kind of hilarious. But they use the tunnels also for civilian purposes, not just for military purposes, although they also use it for military purposes as well. So now let's get to this. This is really interesting. So this is an update from a top Israeli official, and this is quite an admission. This deserved to get a lot more press.
We had the number at 1,400 casualties. And now we've revised that down to 1,200 because we understood that we had overestimated. We made a mistake. There were actually bodies that were so badly burnt, we thought they were ours. In the end, apparently, they were Hamas terrorists. When we make a mistake, we admit it. We had the number.
Okay. So originally, the casualty number was 1,400. You guys know that. We talked about it all the time. Then they did revise it down to 1,200. This is the Israeli government officially saying that. And the reason is some of the really badly burnt bodies turned out to actually be Hamas. It wasn't Israeli civilians like was originally reported. But that then begs the question, well, how the hell did they get so severely burned? Because Hamas doesn't have the, high-level weaponry that can leave people in such a state. And so, of course, the speculation is that's more from, like, people who were caught by the IDF. So, the IDF killed a lot of Hamas people, but also how many Israeli civilians did the IDF also kill? In the wake of the October 7th attack, we learned that on a bunch of kibbutzim, they were being shelled by the Israeli military when Hamas was inside the building. So they were just like, raise it to the ground, even though our own people are in there. And how many instances of that happened, right? Like how many Israeli civilians did the IDF end up killing? So now the number is 1,200, they claim. This is quite an admission. So by the way, now the Palestinian Authority came out and made a similar claim to this, that like, I think they came out and said, there were a lot of innocent people killed by Israel at the music festival, right? There was also apparently verification that Hamas didn't actually know there was a music festival going on. They just like happened to come across me. It's not like they were purposely targeting the military festival, but when they showed up to it, they did end up firing and killing on a lot of civilians. But then the IDF shows up, and did they also kill a massive number of civilians as well? Like there's all these burned cars at the concert, and it's like, does Hamas have the weaponry? They came in on like paragliders or hang gliders. Did they have the weaponry to like torch over 100 cars? Just totally light them on fire? I don't think they did. So then who did that? That had to be the IDF, right? And so the Palestinian Authority came out. They, of course, control West Bank. And they were like, Israel is now admitting that they ended up killing a lot of people, their own civilians. And then Netanyahu did a press conference feigning outrage over it. And it's like a lot of this information is coming from your own officials, right? Like this number, 1,400 to 1,200. And we we thought the burned bodies were our own people, and it was Hamas's fault. It actually was Hamas, and we're the ones who killed them. Okay, well, also, how many civilians of your own did you kill, right? That's not to take away agency from Hamas or to say Hamas didn't kill any civilians. No, we know they killed roughly 45% civilians, right? So they killed, 600 or so civilians. That's totally condemnable and wrong. But the question is, how many Israeli civilians did the IDF also kill? And I don't think we have the full scope of the picture on that yet. We just have these little bits and pieces. Okay, so now look at this. Diplomat from key U.S. ally tells me that Netanyahu is blocking the release of Israeli hostages in Gaza. Biden is well aware, but refuses to pressure Netanyahu publicly. The diplomat says Biden's unconditional support for Israel has made Netanyahu more obstinate and inflexible. Wow. So that last point is devastating, right? If you had the U.S. drawing more clear moral red lines, then Israel would abide by that. But basically, he's been given a green light. So Netanyahu is acting like he has a green light. But also the fact that they're not really prioritizing the hostages. Now, we kind of knew this based on how Israel's acting, but this is just verification from a key U.S. ally. And Trita Parsi is very well connected. He knows a lot of people in these positions. So, I mean, now we're marrying together what we suspected was the case and what's actually the case here. And of course, Israel's top priority is not the hostages because they're not acting like it. They're bombing indiscriminately in Gaza. They've killed at least 20 of the hostages. That's at least if you believe the reports coming out of Gaza. And admittedly, a lot of those reports are originally from Hamas because they released a number of hostages and then later on they had to update it a week or two into the fighting and say, hey, by the way, 20 of your hostages are now dead. And it wasn't us. It was actually your bombing that killed them. So how many more of them are going to die? So the families of the hostages are some of the most furious at Netanyahu. They want him to prioritize bringing back the hostages, of course. Whereas the far right in Israel, which is, let's keep it real, most of the Israeli government, they say, no, our number one priority needs to be completely and utterly eliminating Hamas. So that's goal number one, according to the people with most of the power in this situation. Look at this, man. Several Western and Israeli officials told the Financial Times that Israel now believes Hamas's leadership is in southern Gaza. The leaflets on which the IDF declined to comment said military operations were planned for 4 heavily populated neighborhoods east of Khan Yunis. So in other words, people were told, hey, flee North Gaza because we're coming in there and we're coming in there hard. And a lot of people did flee North Gaza. They go to South Gaza. Israel destroys basically all of North Gaza. Then they go, oopsie, it turns out now we actually think all of the Hamas people are in South Gaza, so we're going to bomb there too. So they're telling the civilians, hey, flee from there. And go where? They can't get into Egypt. They can't get into Israel. They can't leave. So where are they going to go? You already said don't go to North Gaza. Now you're saying get out of South Gaza. There's nowhere left to go. But they're letting everybody know, okay, now we're going to do the next phase of our attack here, and we're going after South Gaza. More on that right here. This is from NPR. Israel told Palestinians to evacuate southern Gaza and stepped up attacks there. Adam Johnson weighs in. This is from the article. Quote, witness accounts, satellite data, and expert assessment gathered by NPR show that Israeli airstrikes and artillery fire occur daily in the areas that Israel said are safer for civilians and have hit schools, residential towers, and overcrowded UN refugee shelters. That's wild, man. That's wild. Now, by the way, I saw a number. This is not verified yet, but apparently like 1/3 or thereabouts of the attacks are happening in southern Gaza, the place that they were told would be safe. So there is no safe place in Gaza. There is no safe place. All right, so just to give you the general numbers breakdown, at least as we have as of right now, again, these numbers are a little different from the UN numbers. The UN number, I think, is still around 12,000 people killed. I don't know if the UN is having trouble keeping up because of the collapsing infrastructure within Gaza. I don't know if they have the ability to, continue counting the number of casualties. But admittedly, the UN number is a little lower. But this is from a Euromed monitor who we've been citing all along because they're also on the ground there as well. And according to them, there's 16,413 Palestinians who have been killed. That includes 6,911 children. We're almost at 7,000 children, guys. And also, of the 16,413 killed, 15,009 of them are innocent civilians. Then we have about 33,000 injuries. We have 54 murdered journalists. That means we've had, I think, 4 new journalists murdered since the last time I talked to you guys about 2 or 3 days ago. We have 1.6 million displaced people, nearly 56,000 completely destroyed housing units. You have 161,800 partially destroyed housing units. Basically, over half of Gaza is now uninhabitable. There's nowhere to go. Like Gaza City's totally destroyed. You have 131 destroyed or damaged press headquarters, 249 damaged schools, 944 destroyed industrial facilities, so like factories, places where people work, 75 mosques damaged, 3 churches still damaged, 428 targeted health staff, including 206 deaths. That's among nurses, doctors, paramedics, 206 of them. And then targeted health facilities more generally, it's 124. Now, I remember, by the way, when everybody was saying, oh, the Al-Ali hospital bombing, I don't think that was Israel. Israel wouldn't bomb hospitals. It's got to be a misfired Islamic Jihad rocket or Hamas rocket or whatever. That was one hospital where everybody was debating. How many hospitals have been hit in total? 22, including 55 clinics and 46 ambulances. So this is, I mean, let's keep it real. This isn't a war. This is a slaughter. It's not a war. You don't have two relatively equal sides when it comes to power. So now I'm going to warn you guys in advance, very, very graphic video. So what you're about to see here is the bombing of the Fakura UN school. This happened the other day. And you see when the guy presses the button, you see it from the IDF's perspective, and then you'll see the aftermath in this school, what it looks like. Again, massive warning in advance. I've never seen so many civilian centers purposely targeted. I've never seen it like this before. You know, I was hypercritical of the U.S. With the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan and Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay, as we should be. But this is going above and beyond the death and destruction of anything we've ever seen in our lifetimes in such a short time span. All right, so this one, another warning, this is a very heart-wrenching story here. This is what somebody went through. This is actually in the West Bank, so this is not where Hamas is in control. This is where the Palestinian Authority is in control. And there's also been violence ramped up in the West Bank as well. Watch this.
We'd come to meet the Mohammed family. Ibrahim and Nahida lost their son 2 weeks ago. The family watched from their balcony as 15-year-old Taha was shot dead below them. He'd heard Israeli troops were in town and he'd gone out with a friend, phone in hand, his family said, to have a look. We're not showing the moment he died, but he appeared to present no threat. The screams are from Sarah, Taha's sister. She'd just filmed her brother being killed.
He is in the paradise right now. He had 3 shots. His leg, and the last one under his eyes. Yeah.
Moments after, she filmed her father. He'd gone out to help his son. He too was shot. Ibrahim is out of hospital now, his physical wounds healing.
I saw my son laying on the floor with no value, like an animal. I said, I am a father. The boy has been killed. I ask for mercy. Then I heard bullets around me, and they hit my back. And my daughter said, come back, Dad.
Taha is one of at least 52 children to be killed in the West Bank since the Hamas attacks in southern Israel on October the 7th. That is more than in any other month in 56 years. We've asked the Israeli military twice to explain what happened that night in Tulkarem. They have not responded. The Palestinians...
Shocking. So it's just cold-blooded murder. That's what happened. That guy was not a threat. He wasn't armed. They shot him dead anyway. Okay, this one's even worse, man. I mean, that last one was horrendous. This one is even worse. So here you're going to see another news report. 4-year-old Ahmed lost his parents, and then he lost his legs in the second attack. And he keeps asking for his parents, and he wants to get up and walk, but his parents are dead, and his legs have been amputated. 4-year-old Gazan lost his parents and both legs in separate Israeli strikes. The child did not only lose his parents, he lost his legs too. He is still a child. What did he do to deserve this? We hope that God will kill him and ease it on him. God will heal him. Is that what he said? Let me see. The child asks every day, "Where's my father?" Every single day, but we try very hard to make him forget and adjust to the situation he is currently in. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, that's super dark, man. Israel bombs Gaza's only operating wheat mill, intensifying its war of starvation against Palestinian civilians. So look, the infrastructure in Gaza has largely collapsed. So we're not getting the total picture of the death and destruction and devastation. We're getting a lot, but we're not getting nearly the total picture. How many people are still stuck under the rubble? How many people died because they were stuck under the rubble and nobody could get them out? They starved to death, or they went thirsty, or they succumbed to their wounds. We already had reports from weeks ago of people basically drinking salt water to survive. So with the total siege, there's a lot of people who are experiencing a slow, painful, grueling death. And I don't think the statistics coming out of there fully capture the devastation. And so now with Israel purposefully bombing the only operating wheat mill, what do you think is going to happen? A lot more people are going to go hungry. A lot of people have already gone thirsty. So I think this death toll that we're seeing now, even the Euromed Monitor one, which is the higher one, that's not going to encapsulate the final. It's going to be way, way higher than that. And by the way, yet again, this is another example of ripping the mask off the face of the argument. We're just targeting Hamas. Really? Was it only Hamas that used this wheat mill? No, civilians need to eat to survive. The fact of the matter is they don't care about civilians. They've made that perfectly clear time and time and time again. All right, so here's another one. We have, this is an IDF soldier raiding a classroom, and I'll read to you what he says here. Invading an elementary school and smashing student certificates on the wall is sure to help Israel's propaganda war. That's the text on the screen here. I should also point out, they blew up like the official government building in Gaza. They took a picture in it after they basically stole it, and then they blew it up. Here we are coming back, Gush Katif, the lands of Gaza, painting them back orange. We are here. So I think that's an indication of illegal settlers now coming back to Gaza. The people of Israel are not scared of a long road war. Yeah, doesn't look targeted to me. Doesn't look targeted at all. So here we go. This is another Israeli government official. All the preoccupation with whether or not there is internet in Gaza shows that we have learned nothing. We are too humane. Burn Gaza now, no less. This is a member of parliament. What they say to each other internally is very damning. It's very damning. So here we have Mehdi Hassan pressing an Israeli government official, and he makes a astounding claim. Listen to this.
But I have seen lots of children with my own lying eyes being pulled from the rubble.
Because they're the pictures Hamas wants you to see. Exactly my point, Mehdi.
They're
the pictures Hamas wants.
But they're also people that your government has killed. You accept that, right? You've killed children, or do you deny that?
No, I do not. I do not. I do not. First of all, you don't know how those people died, those children.
Oh, wow. But I have seen lots of...
So he's denying that the Israeli government has killed any children at all. I just showed you the number. It's almost at 7,000 children. We have pictures. We have videos. And he's like, no, I'm not buying it. Man, I've never seen a country lose a propaganda war so thoroughly. Everybody was making fun of the other day. The State of Israel Twitter account tweeted out some video, some like cartoon video, describing how oh, if a young man loses his life in the fighting and the wife wants to preserve the bloodline, they have a process, a medical process by which they go and get the semen from the guy so that they can then, the woman can then be impregnated and can continue the bloodline. And people were like, so y'all are jacking off corpses? Is that what's happening? You're jacking off corpses. And then you had people come out and say, let me be clear, no corpses were jacked off. And it's like, oh my God, I've never seen a country so thoroughly lose a propaganda war. Israeli forces kill 8 Palestinians, attack. This is a different hospital now in the West Bank. Again, not Hamas there. It's the Palestinian Authority in control there. They're attacking hospitals now in the West Bank. So here we have another Israeli official goes on CNN. This time it's a former Israeli intelligence chief. And he says the following, quote, "The non-combatant population in the Gaza Strip is really a non-existent term because all of the Gazans voted for Hamas. And as we have seen on the 7th of October, most of the population in the Gaza Strip are Hamas." So that's an astounding claim. That's another claim of like, I don't buy into this notion that there are Palestinian civilians or civilians in Gaza. I think they're all guilty enough. So thankfully, there's a community note right underneath here. Now, Anderson Cooper totally lets that comment slide. Totally lets it slide. He doesn't push back even 1% on that, which is astonishing to me. But community notes chimed in here. Elections have not been held in Gaza since 2006. About half of Gaza's current population are children and could not vote in the last election cycle. The people of Palestine have not had a chance to electorally remove Hamas. In other words, this is total garbage. This is total BS. I've seen attempts to do an analysis of like what percentage of the population currently living in Gaza actually did vote for Hamas. And I think they said the high percentage number was like 14%. 14%. And this guy's like, no, they're all pro-Hamas. They're all guilty enough. So I don't buy this idea that there's this civilian population there. Again, this is an instance of, as opposed to the other guy who lied, as opposed to the other guy who lied and said we didn't kill any children, this guy is taking the opposite approach and being like, yay, genocide. All right, more. This one's interesting. So Reuters reports that Iran's supreme leader told Hamas chief during their meeting earlier this month, quote, "You gave us no warning of your October 7th attack on Israel, and we will not enter the war on your behalf." So this flies directly in the face of the earlier reporting from the Wall Street Journal, which has since been debunked that Iran was directly involved with creating this attack, preparing this attack, doing the logistics. It turns out they weren't. And we had U.S. intelligence come out that basically people in Iran were surprised at the attack. When it happened, they were like, "Ooh, I didn't know this is crazy what's happening here." So we know that, but I didn't know this, that the supreme leader is basically pissed and is like, hey man, you're on your own. So understand something, they are allies. Hamas and the Iranian government are allies, but there are key crucial differences. It's basically an alliance of convenience because they're both against Israel. When it comes to Hamas, they are basically a Sunni Palestinian Arab organization. And of course, the government in Iran are Shia Persian theocrats, right? So there are differences there. And even though they're allies, this is the leader of Iran saying, hey, you know, we're not going to get involved to save your ass. We saw what you did and we were surprised by it. And this isn't how we would have done it. Okay. This is wild. So this is from Al Monitor. They talk about, here's one of the solutions being floated for how to deal with Gaza after the war. It's a slaughter. One creative solution being floated is the construction of a huge artificial island off the coast of Gaza. It will be cheaper and faster than rebuilding the Gaza Strip itself. A very senior former security official told Al Monitor, seeking to promote his brainchild, there is technology, means, and money. Abu Dhabi and Dubai have huge numbers of artificial islands, which have become hubs of tourism, commerce, housing, and infrastructure. It is relatively easy. It is cheap, and it will allow everyone to turn over a new leaf. The Gazans will receive a new land with efficient infrastructure. There will no longer be a land border between Israel and Gaza. So this is, one of the terms I've heard to describe this is seasteading. Create an artificial island or an artificial city out on the water, build like a fake island and expel the Palestinians there. I mean, really, this is where we're at. These are the ideas that are being floated. Let's do like a high-tech version of an ethnic cleansing and pretend like it's humanitarian. So now we get to the U.S. response. Some really interesting updates here. So apparently, Biden says the U.S. is prepared to impose sanctions on Israeli settlers who are involved in attacks against Palestinians in the West Bank. This is the first time an idea like this has ever been floated. But also, let's be clear, going after the individual, hyper-religious Israeli settler terrorists, like, it's good, but there's not much of a punch there, because what are you going to do? You're going to block them from, like, coming to the U.S. or something like that? What exactly are the sanctions that we're talking about here? If you really wanted to prevent this, you know who to go after. It's the Israeli government, who are using the illegal settlers for their own purposes and ends. They want them to annex more land in the West Bank so that eventually they could say, oh, what are we going to do? We're like 90% of the population in the West Bank, so let's just say this is ours and the Palestinians got to go. So it's sort of like this mission creep thing that we're watching. It's been their plan for a long time. Increase settlements, increase settlements, increase settlements, that eventually say, oh, well, I mean, look, if you want to do some sort of a deal, well, we're 90% of the people there, so maybe we deserve 90% of the land. So to just go after the individual settlers, I mean, it's good, but it's not nearly enough. You know you have to go after the government if you actually want to make a change. But still, this shows that the pressure coming from protesters and activists in the U.S. and the polling numbers, which are overwhelmingly against Biden on this, they're getting to him. 70% disapproval among young people with how Biden's handling Israel right now. 70% disapproval. That's a key voting block he's going to need in 2024. So now his tune is starting to change a little. Again, not nearly enough, but they're feeling the pressure. Keep it up. U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner tells Margaret Brennan, U.S. advising Israel not to move forward with South Gaza combat until civilians, including hundreds of thousands who fled from North Gaza, are accounted for in their military planning. So now, look, this could go one of two ways. Either Biden was crystal clear saying, you're not attacking South Gaza. I'm not letting you do that. In which case, good. Or this is still the green light behind the scenes to Netanyahu. You do whatever you want. But publicly, Biden's like, I told him, sir, you better be more humanitarian in your next bombing campaign or your next invasion going to the south of Gaza. So one of those things is just face-saving PR bullshit. The other one would be legitimate. Do we know which one it is? Well, right now, the evidence kind of indicates it's just PR bullshit because Israel is bombing South Gaza, right? Eventually, maybe the ground invasion happens. We all know what they're trying to do. They're trying to totally ethnically cleanse Gaza, kick out the Palestinians, move them into a tent city in the Sinai Desert through the Egypt border. That's what they want. This is Biden saying, at least publicly, hey, pump your brakes a little bit. Too many civilians have been killed. I'm not going to allow this. But is he actually saying that? Is he actually demanding that? Or is it just a face-saving PR move where he says it, but ultimately Netanyahu's going to do it anyway? That's the more likely thing right now. But I hope that's not the case. I hope this actually has teeth. Again, you have to get to the point where you start conditioning aid to Israel. You have to do it. You have to condemn them. You have to condition aid to them. You're at the point now where, shit, you need to sanction them at the very least. I mean, I think Netanyahu is a war criminal. His ass should be locked up at The Hague. But at the very least, we should be sanctioning them. Here we go. The UN Security Council passed a resolution calling for pauses in the fighting in Gaza. The U.S. didn't veto it. It is the first time the UN Security Council adopts a resolution on the war. So this is a big deal. This is the U.S. saying, we actually do want to pause in the fighting. And we've been softly trying to rein in Netanyahu. It's not working. Let's, at the UN at least, take a stand and say, we want to pause in the fighting. Now, last time we talked, I told you guys there was a tentative deal that was reached to basically free some hostages in exchange for a 5-day pause and some more humanitarian aid. But the White House came out afterward and said, it's actually not even a tentative deal yet. So in other words, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We don't have a deal yet. And since then, I haven't heard any updates, which leads me to believe we're not really close to a deal. But this is the UN saying, you got to stop bombing right now. You need to pause the fighting. Now, obviously, I wish it was stronger than that. I wish it wasn't just a pause. It was totally stopping it. It was a ceasefire. But this is the first time we've seen any hint at all of the U.S. inching even 2% away from Israel to say, no, we're with the rest of the world here. We got to pause this fighting a little bit. Again, at the end of the day, will it be PR bullshit or will it be real? That's yet to be seen. The evidence right now says PR bullshit, but let's wait and find out, and then we'll talk about it when we see how it unfolds. Democrats in the Senate and House discuss conditioning military aid to Israel. Conversations in Congress are preliminary, and it's unclear if lawmakers will actually pressure the White House to change course. So again, now the conversation is starting, But look, bottom line is your position should be, I'll believe it when we actually see it. I'll believe it when we see a bill. I'll believe it when there's more public pressure. But clearly the noise that everybody's making is getting to them. So at least they have to try to virtue signal like, no, we're kind of with you at the moment. Okay? This is wild. So this is reporting from Slate. Sources say AIPAC is gearing up to spend over $100 million as part of a campaign to knock the squad out of Congress in 2024. Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, Jamal Bowman, Summer Lee, and Rashida Tlaib are all marked for high-dollar challenges. So in other words, look, I told you guys this. As a co-founder of Justice Democrats, this was probably the first time I've ever legit been proud of them because they led the way saying ceasefire. They led the way super early on saying, whoa, 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 this is unacceptable. The civilian bodies are piling up. We're against it. We want a ceasefire. And they've been screaming for a ceasefire from the top of their lungs for weeks now. And they're like the only ones. They're like the only ones who are doing it. But guess what? I told you guys, from our perspective, we look at it and go, that's obvious. You have to call for a ceasefire. Duh. But if you're inside the belly of the beast, you call for a ceasefire, and the Israel lobby rains holy hell on your head in the next election. They will dump millions and millions and millions of dollars to try to take your ass down. And you know what? In some instances, it might work. Jamal Bowman, for example, is in a district where this could really hurt him. So he was brave for coming out and taking a moral stand and saying, let's do a ceasefire. But this is why other Democrats are also terrified of saying, I want a ceasefire, because they know AIPAC's going to target them. DMFI is going to target them. Potentially J Street is going to target them early on. Even J Street, the liberal Zionist group, they were like, no, if you call for a ceasefire, we're going to target you. So this is how money controls our politics. You understand that? That you have a position which like about 70% of the country agrees with. 80% of Democrats agree with a ceasefire. And that position is not being adopted by the overwhelming majority of Democrats. It's only like, what, 10% of Democrats who are in favor of a ceasefire, and now the number's a little bit over 30, something like that. So think about that. Money is controlling the situation, and they're going to do everything they can to knock out the squad now and the Justice Democrats. And like, for a long time, we all thought, well, Jesus, there's really no difference, right, between a Justice Democrat or any other regular schmegular Democrat, because at the end of the day, they seem to agree on a hell of a whole lot. Well, now you're finally beginning to see some of the difference. And I hope they lean into it. I hope they take on the fight. I hope they raise through small dollar donations. I hope they crusade for the proper position so they can harness the will of the people to keep them in power. But they're going to be up against a tsunami of big money. So, I mean, I wish them well, because they're taking a moral stand here, and they might have to pay the price for taking a moral stand and doing the right thing unequivocally. $100 million to knock these people out. We got to get money out of politics, man. This is unacceptable. So I told you guys that Hezbollah has potentially gotten more directly involved here. Now, I should be clear. I haven't seen verification yet from many media outlets, but I have seen some of these videos come out, some of these pictures come out, and some sources say Hezbollah just destroyed the Bernat Israel military barracks, which is a site near the Lebanese border. Now, it would line up with what Nasrallah said the other day. He tweeted something ominous like, we are coming, and it was like a 3-minute video with it. And people are like, is this bluster, or is Hezbollah going to actually do something? And it may be the case that Hezbollah actually did something here. So here you can see what the ruins look like. Again, I wouldn't say this is totally verified yet, but if indeed this went down as it's being reported, look out, because then if Israel starts escalating even further with Hezbollah, what if they start bombing Beirut? What if they start going after all of Lebanon, right? Like that's the fear, and that could happen. There's already been tit for tat fighting. There's already been some back and forth, but it's been, few and far between for the most part, certainly compared to what's going on in Gaza. Now with Hezbollah doing this, is Israel going to say, oh, it's on now? A lot of this is going to depend on the U.S. If Biden tells Netanyahu, you better not open up a front in Lebanon, then he can't do it. But if Netanyahu does it, then he got the green light from Biden. And by the way, the U.S. says we will back Israel and help with Hezbollah if it comes to that, which we don't want that. Nobody in the U.S. wants that. And this would make Biden's numbers plummet even more. Here's some more video of it real quick. You can see here. All right. There you go. And then finally, I'll show you the last ones here. IDF confirms Houthis hijacked ship in Red Sea. He says it's not an Israeli vessel. So the Houthis are not messing around. They're trying to block Israeli ships from getting to Israel. And apparently, if you read the specifics of this story, at least according to the IDF, this ship is not an Israeli ship. There's like a part owner of the ship is Israeli, but they were leasing it out to somebody else. So it says the ship was sailing from Turkey to India with an international civilian crew without any Israelis on board. And then, you know, I don't know, this happened like a day or two ago. I don't know the update on the story, but there's 52 crew members aboard the vessel, and they're basically like, what the hell is going on here? The Bahamian-flagged vessel is registered under a British company, which is partially owned by an Israeli tycoon, Abraham Unger, who goes by Rami. The vessel was leased out to a Japanese company at the time of the hijacking. The Iran-backed Houthis have vowed to target Israeli-linked vessels in the Red Sea. So this is them like following through on that, but perhaps this wasn't exactly what they were looking for, but clearly they're not messing around. I told you guys a while ago, Yemen actually officially. Okay. So here we have an example of, if not now, this is a direct protest that they did, ceasefire now protest, and they have completely taken over the California Democratic Convention, and the stage sits abandoned. So this is more example of direct action protest, applying tremendous amounts of pressure on the establishment and on politicians to do the right thing and back a ceasefire. And then finally, reporters who signed letter condemning Israel's killing of journalists banned from covering the conflict. So a bunch of journalists at the LA Times got together and said, this is messed up. We're condemning Israel for killing. Now it's over 50 journalists. And guess what? They were benched. So the LA Times go, that's nice. You can't talk about this conflict anymore. You can't report on this conflict anymore. Why? Because you're biased. You're biased. It's an unfair bias to be against murdering journalists, apparently. It's an unfair bias. It's astonishing, man. You could say the sky is blue. You could say the most benign, obviously correct thing. But if it, in any way, shape, or form, is a criticism of Israel, you're gonzo. You're gonzo. So this is pathetic and disgusting. Let me be clear. A journalist should be objective. They shouldn't be neutral. Neutral means I'm going to call it 50-50 no matter what. Everything's equal all the time. Democrats, Republicans, equal. This versus that, everything's equal. Climate change versus it's a hoax, that's equal. Right? Evolution versus creationism, equal. This is what neutrality is. You shouldn't be neutral. You should be objective, which means telling the truth no matter where it's false. And in this instance, it is telling the truth to say journalists shouldn't be murdered for doing their jobs. And that is a bridge too far for these scumbags and these sociopaths. So anyway, there you have it. There are the updates. This was a very long segment, but still got my eye on the conflict. And we'll see any developments that come up in the next few days, and I'll give those to you as well. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.